Actually, I'm doing a story now that is, you would think is dark, and it is dark, but I'm looking at religion in a different way. There's the story that I wrote in the New Yorker in their 100th anniversary just a couple of months ago, that I'm making into a book now.
Oh, really?
I was walking with a friend, and she was talking about her mother, who's in the Catholic prison services, and spent time talking to women on the death row in Texas. There are 7 women on death row, and she talked about these nuns that came to visit them every month, and I thought,
oh, these are the young nuns.
There aren't very many young
right,
nuns.
They're mostly older.
The average age for a nun in America is 80.
Right.
But this is a new order called Sisters of Mary Morningstar that Pope Francis ordained. And they live in Waco, oddly enough, not so far from the remains of the Branch Davidian compound. But the sort of hero in my book is this Catholic deacon named Ronnie Lastovica, who's a cattleman, and he lives in Belton, Texas, and a real Texas figure. But he's a very pious Catholic, and his bishops said he wanted him to start ministering into the women's prisons. There are 5, I think, in Gatesville, and 4 of them are women's prisons and 1 men. Huntsville has most of the men. But so he started interviewing the women, or ministering to the women on death row, and it occurred to him that there were some women who lived very similar lives. So he drove over to Waco and knocked on the door of the convent. And bear in mind, these nuns, although they haven't taken a vow of silence, essentially they're silent and praying all day long. Mm-hmm. And wow. Although they're not cloistered, they don't go out very much. So Ronnie knocks on the door and says, "Sister, there's some women who could use your help, and they're living in community, but they don't know how. And you've got ancient monastic traditions about how to live together, and I think you could help them." And oh, okay, well, where are they? Well, they're on death row. So, we don't get out much, So these women, their average age is mid-30s. And so if there's a future of Catholicism, I think they're going to be a part of it. But they were terrified, but they felt obligated because Ronnie had asked, and it seemed like something that they were capable of. So they went to this highly secure prison, and interestingly, the guards were a little scared of the nuns. It's like they entered to a different order. So they were on their best behavior and a little awed, and they're all in these gray habits. They look,
What a riveting scene.
Yeah. And they walk into the, common room where the death row women are all dressed in white. And the weird thing is they immediately embraced each other. And it was true. They have very much in common. They each live in cells, as they're called in the convent. They each arise around 4:30 in the morning and pray, and then they got crafts and stuff. It's just very similar lives. But one of the nuns said, also, you should understand that we are not beautiful women. We don't use cosmetics. We don't dress in. There's nothing to be afraid of us, because we are plain. And the women on death row had long since gone past the days when they were vibrant young women. The years have taken a toll on them. So I think they really felt a kinship. And so I'm working on that story.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about death row. I mean, there's a huge percentage. I don't remember the exact percentage. Maybe Steve, you can find it, but of people that end up on death row who are innocent. And it's like a big to do to get any sort of look over or like a redo of their conviction, or like a relook at like looking at their DNA, because I know the DNA, they get the DNA wrong a lot, or like for whatever reason these whoever gets these the prosecutors who get these convictions and the judges, and there's this reluctance to admit that they got something so serious like this wrong.
Well, there's one woman on death row who is actually innocent, and her name is Melissa Lucio, and she was convicted of murdering her 2-year-old toddler, who in fact had fallen down the steps, and that was what was the reason that she eventually died. She had like a brain hemorrhage.
Oh God!
But she was convicted by this prosecutor in Brownsville, Texas, who was running for Congress, and he was essentially working for the cartel, and he was selling sentences, and Melissa didn't have any money. So it would look good on his record if he had a death conviction for a child abuse case. And so he was hiding evidence, eyewitness testimony from her own children who saw the little girl fall down the steps. And that wasn't admitted in the trial. Her defense attorney had just applied for a job with the district attorney. And his wife was working for the judge, so it was a very comfortable scene in Brownsville.
Oh my God!
The prosecutor eventually went to prison himself. He was sentenced for 13 years for fraud, and served, I think, 5 of those years. But Melissa was finally demonstrated to be innocent because of all these factors. And once the fact that the eyewitness testimony was allowed in the court, it became very clear that she would never have been convicted. And yet, even now, she's on death row because the Court of Criminal Appeals is twiddling its thumbs, waiting to decide, should we free this one? Because of what you say, there's this sense that if the jury spoke and said she's guilty, then we have to move heaven and earth to actually change that. And
right.
There's another woman, Brittany Holberg, who was convicted of murdering this 80-year-old man in Amarillo. She was a prostitute at the time, but it was a gruesome 45-minute struggle between the two of them. And capital case, you have to. There are several things you can't. You don't get executed just because you murdered somebody. It has to have an additional factor. It has to be a child. It has to be in process of a robbery, or or process of escaping from prison. There are like 10 different things. Anyway, a jailhouse snitch. They put a woman in the cell with Brittany, and then she came out and said that Brittany told me she enjoyed killing him and that she was going to do it again, and that she stole all this money. And so that eventually got to the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas and the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And her conviction has now been vacated, but it will be challenged by Texas, I'm sure, again. But in my opinion, when you use a jailhouse snitch who was paid for her testimony, I think that should, a retrial at best.
For sure. 100%.